what, if any, possible solution can there be to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the Middle East, which is in chaos? Are we heading toward an Armageddon? No, we are not heading toward Armageddon, in my opinion, but we are going to have continuous trouble there. There is no place in the world today that is free of trouble. There are tensions and
Worse, that's worse.
there are tensions and all kinds of problems everywhere. And the Middle East is no exception. In fact, it's worse there than anywhere else. The Israelis are so superior in military power and financial power that the Palestinians cannot really do much damage. There'll be a few stabbings when you come right down to it. The Jewish victims of these terrorist, so-called terrorist activities, you can count them on the fingers of one hand. And they say that if you sneeze in Jerusalem, it makes a headline in Washington. They exaggerate, the media vastly exaggerate. Life in Jerusalem, as we hear from our children, is normal. People go out, and they were told to take your guns with you, so they do. Most Israelis have served in the army, they have guns, and they're going to use them. There will be Palestinians killed, there's no question, because when they come up with a knife against the guy with a pistol, the fellow with the pistol is going to eventually get the other guy down. So I'm concerned, I'm troubled, but I'm not worried. Yeah.
I want to change subjects and ask you, for some of us who have grandchildren who aren't dating Jewish people.
There's nothing you can do about it. About 40, 50 years ago you still could, but not now. With 60 to 70% of Jewish weddings being interfaith weddings, what you can do, however, is to make an inviting Jewish home with a lot of warmth and acceptance, and let them participate, and amazingly, quite a number of people convert to Judaism as a result. Yes?
Rabbi, how do you and Maxine spend your time when you're in Jerusalem? What do you do?
Spend my time in Jerusalem, no problem. One day at a time. No, we go to family events, we go to lectures, and we see movies and theatrical plays. We're very busy in Jerusalem, and it's a very pleasant life. The climate is wonderful. It's up in the mountains, you know, you get clean, good air, and all the evenings are cool. In fact, we have to take sweaters along even in the summer. Yes?
I'm active in the synagogue with a group called the Boomers, and also a new program, the Wise Aging Program. And I wonder if you could reflect back on all your years of wisdom to what advice you would give. To what advice you would give to a 60-year-old to know now, to live the best life that they could, maybe that you wish you had known at 60.
No matter what life, what age, there's always going to be some unhappiness. So the best you can do is to endure those passages of life that are not pleasant, but you can't avoid it. My best advice is for people who are 60 to have friends who are 40. Stay with the younger crowd. Being 96, going on 97, you youngsters, you know, would be just about the kind of people I like to be with. Any other question? Yes?
Yes. Can you give us your thoughts on what the Reform movement is like in Israel today?
The Reform movement in Israel, what is it like?
I know Reform rabbis still can't do weddings over there, they can't do conversions.
They can do weddings, they can do conversions. What they do is a simple way. In order to have it recognized by the Ministry of Religion, they get a cooperative Orthodox rabbi to just stand there with him, and the Orthodox rabbi signs the certificate. But to speak of a suppression of reform is ridiculous. You can be reform, you can be conservative, you can be anything you want to be. But you may not get the full recognition of the ministry when, let us say, your child wants to get married. They have to get all marriages and all funerals, all personal ceremonies in Israel for Jews and Christians are completely handled by their respective religious authorities. The state has nothing to do with it. The state does not perform marriages. So I think people adjust to that.
Would you like to see civil ceremonies for weddings permitted sometime? I understand now you have to go to Cyprus if you want.
I would like to see a civil ceremony, but it's not a major issue. People can live without it. Let's just get a nice Jewish boy for marriage. Yeah.
One of the most significant developments in the local community over the last 5-10 years has been 6th and I. The reason, 6th and I.
Yeah, 6th and I.
The reason I raised it, I read a recent study, extensive, 80, 100 pages, which said what we're having in Washington with 6th and I is happening all across the United States, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, etc. It does have an impact on the synagogues within the community in terms of both attracting younger members and the commitment that people make when there are alternatives, so that people that join the synagogue for the bar and bar mitzvah, for example, are being bar and bar mitzvah. And if you get the 6th and I program each week, it's compelling. How do you assimilate, deal with it? Why are congregations not making efforts at all to try to work something together with these 6th and I's?
All right, I'll try to repeat the gist of the question. An interesting development in Washington, typical of other cities, is what's been happening at 6th and I. 6th and I has Jewish activities and the sort of center of Jewish assemblies that are not conducted by synagogues. The synagogues seem to be out of it. Nothing wrong with that. Why should I stick to the synagogue when I can have my own little group? More and more in different cities, there are small groups of 20 or 30 people who meet regularly on Shabbat. They don't have a rabbi, they don't have a synagogue, but they meet together and they offer some prayers or make some brief lectures or comments on the Torah portion. I think it's perfectly fine. We're not synagogue bound, don't have to be in the synagogue. Jews are Jews as a people, and they can meet outside the synagogue, and that's one of the glories of our faith, that we are free in many ways in which other religions are not.
Working as a psychologist with very mentally ill patients, I find they need help in prayer and hopefulness that comes from our Judaism. Now, how can we separate church and state when we feel that being a psychologist is being a good Jewish person?
How can you separate church and state when you feel as a social worker or state representative, when you have to do some counseling? Can you also counsel in religious matters of affiliation? I wouldn't worry about it. I think you can. You just go ahead and do it.
Your opinion of Netanyahu?
My opinion of Netanyahu? I wouldn't like to be in his place. He's got a tough job. I don't want to offer an opinion. Living in Washington in complete freedom and safety, I should say something about Netanyahu, who is in the center of a turmoil. The Middle East is a chaos. So whatever Netanyahu is doing has to be judged by the people of Israel there, not here.
Right. Marvin Bernstein, you remember, a mutual friend, said that the difficulty of finding a solution is the only thing the Palestinians have is the fight to sit down and negotiate. That's the only chip they have. And he was rather skeptical.
Well, the point was made, did you all hear it?
Yes.
That the only thing to do now is to negotiate the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Well, I tell you, human nature is very strange, very odd. There are situations in which we only do the right thing after we've done everything wrong. In other words, first come all the bad approaches, and then finally, after a good deal of suffering, we hit the right way. And I think the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is going to linger for years, maybe decades, until both sides see it's time for a solution. Yeah.
I'm curious to know if you agree with Netanyahu's disdain of the Iranian nuclear agreement. I mean, your personal feeling.
What would I think about the nuclear agreement? I can't offer an opinion because I'm not expert enough to judge it.
That's a fine ask.
Yeah, I'm not answering. It's a cop-out, that's right. I don't, ignorance is a fact, you know, it's not a cop-out.
Can you comment on the political, in my mind, divergence that most American Jews are Democrats, but AIPAC, with its very strong pro-Israeli, has now aligned itself entirely with the Republicans in Congress. So the AIPAC is Republican, and oddly enough, Congress has no Jewish Republicans, but all the Republicans love Israel. They don't particularly want any Jewish candidates. So it seems that AIPAC lost its bipartisan nature by just jumping in on the Republican Congress Netanyahu wing of the thing.
Did you hear the point? Yes. It's really an odd thing. There are Jewish Republicans.
I've heard that.
Don't forget that. There are. I don't know whether the percentage is 20%, 30%, or 40%. But there's a considerable and growing number of Jewish Republicans. But it has been said, Jews live like Rockefellers and they vote like Puerto Ricans. So, for I don't know what reasons, Jews are addicted to their Democratic Party loyalties. I think it has to do with the overwhelming memories of Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Well, I was asked by a Republican neighbor whether the Jews feel a requirement to help the underdog. And I pointed out, yes, we ate tzedakah, B, leaving the corners for the poor, and the requirement to help the underdog and the privileged, the unprivileged.
Did you hear that point? Yes. It has been said that Jews have an overwhelming desire and commitment to help the underdog.
A religious requirement.
A religious requirement. I think it could be said, although I wouldn't exaggerate, we're not that compassionate. But as a people, we seem to be more compassionate than other groups. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like that. I can't see any reason why we should be opposed to it. Now, would that be the reason why Jews, in their vast majority, vote Democratic? Possibly. AIPAC is a political lobbying group in which sentiment does not count. The realities of the political constellation is what matters. And the fact of the matter is that AIPAC wants to sort of even out the Democratic-Republican representation in Congress. Any other comment or question? Yes.
Can you talk about, unfortunately, the increase in anti-Semitic events and incidents in Europe in the last few years, especially after so many Muslims have moved there?
Increase of anti-Semitic events in Europe. In Europe, everything has gotten worse. And the fact of the matter is that the amount of anti-Semitism even in Europe is relatively small. We are nowhere near a pre-Hitler situation. I wouldn't exaggerate it. The media like to do that, but I don't think that anti-Semitism in Europe is a very big factor. In fact, Jews play a big role in the political and economic life. They're relatively well off economically. I wouldn't expect a messianic perfection. It's not going to happen. There's going to be hatred, tension, and all kinds of anti-Semitic incidents all over the world. But compared with others, I think we're doing well. I foresee, as a European formerly, I foresee eventually a very strong anti-Islam movement in Europe. I think Muslims are going to be expelled and punished for whatever happens on the Muslim direction in other parts of the world and even in Europe. Yes?
Do you think that the government of Angela Merkel and the German, and some reportedly of the German population, has a legitimate fear of losing their Germanic culture and ways to this influx of Syrian as Muslims?
Did you all get the question? Shall I repeat it? Oh, you got the question. What about Germany and the Syrian refugees? Are they going to gradually overwhelm European culture? I think that Germany, at least for the short run, is accepting Syrian refugees because, I'm really amazed at that, because the age structure of Germany is very unfavorable. Germans don't have more than 1 or 2 children at the most. A lot of German couples don't have any children. They prefer to live well and not to spend any effort or money on children. And also there's this aging population. And in order to offset the loss of youth, people who could work in factories and would have the energy and the physical strength to do these things, because of that, they would temporarily favor the immigration of young, vigorous people. But I think that's going to change. Europe is known for its hostility to the unlike. The Europeans are not what you would call a very accepting and, shall we say, tolerant nation or continent. America is unique. After a short while, any immigrant is considered an American. Not so in Europe. You can have 3 generations of people in a certain country and they will not be accepted as fellow citizens. They are strangers. That may change, who knows, but right now I think that what happened in Germany is going to be a temporary situation, and in maybe 5 or 10 years from now there'll be a reversal where they close the borders and they don't want any more refugees.
I'm curious what your reaction was to the arrival of the Pope in Washington on Yom Kippur, and a failure on the part of the rabbinate, as well as the media, to even make a mild comment that there might be a lack of sensitivity. And I spoke with some very close Catholic friends that for many years bristled when I said it, nothing else fit into the schedule. The Pope at the Vatican looks at a calendar. I had been in a meeting in New York the week before, I'm on a board, and a year in advance, looking at the calendar, all Christians said to me, Paul, when is your Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? We don't want to have a problem. The Pope in Rome and the assistants wouldn't know when Yom Kippur was. And why was there such total silence on this? So I did raise it. I raised it with someone high in the government. And I said, why is there no comment whatsoever on this? And I got back saying, you're 100% right, but please, Paul, don't make us stink. That's an email, because we don't want to affect Jewish-Catholic relations. But why was there such total silence?
I think you all heard the question or the comment. Personally, I don't care. Let the Pope come whenever he wants to come. If he wants to come on Yom Kippur and fast with us, he's welcome. But I was not offended by that at all.
But when Benedict came, Rabbi Lustig had an opportunity, local clergy, including rabbis, had the opportunity to meet with him. So there was that opportunity if he came on any other day.
It could have been, but I wouldn't magnify the issue at all.
To just make a comment, the chief rabbi down in Argentina is a personal friend of the Pope, wrote the foreword for when he was bishop's or cardinal, his book, and when the rabbi came to Rome, he was asked to stay at the hotel where the Pope keeps his quarters, and he said, well, priests had to pay for their meals. The hotel was free, but they had to pay for their. The Pope refused to let him pay, and so his relationship with this rabbi was incredible.
Well, I, for one, think that this Pope is a good Pope, and I wouldn't criticize him on any count. I see nothing that violates Jewish sensitivities. If he wants to come, let him come any date, I don't care. So we can have a Jewish celebration or a Jewish event or lecture on Christmas Day. Why not?
The Pope used a phrase about Judaism that I never heard from the Catholics before. He called Judaism a foundational religion. And thinking back to days when Catholics would say Jews are Christ killers or something, do you think that was the progressive thing for the Pope to say that Judaism is a foundational religion?
Yes, I think you all heard the point. The Catholic Church, I think, bears maybe 50% responsibility for the Holocaust, because the Catholic Church was violently anti-Jewish, responsible for expulsions and persecutions. There's been just one great and revolutionary change, and that was Vatican II. When the Vatican declared Judaism to be a valid religion, you can say foundational. In other words, there's no reason for Catholics in any way whatsoever to be hostile to Judaism. On the contrary, today Catholicism, as all Christian branches, suffer a great erosion of membership. There has been a decline of Christian faith in Europe, a sharp decline, and the Church is seeking ways of again fortifying its position, and one of the ways is to recognize its Jewish origin.
It was John Paul, though, was the one who went into the synagogue and said, "You're my elder."
Yeah, John Paul, that's a good point. Recognized Judaism as my elder brother. Now that's a different attitude from what the Middle Ages had represented for centuries. Any other comment? Yes?
I have a question, but it's not about the Catholic Church.
Any other church, I don't care.
I was struck by something you said this morning, which was sort of your perspective on human nature, that for thousands of years we haven't really changed in sort of our moral standing, and that our underlying nature of people is to be, I forget the word you used, but it was something like belligerent or
Savage.
savage. How do you explain, what's your sense of how it is that we adapt to that, and that we've so, you know, here we are talking about compassion, and we live together, and we try to work together as nations and people. How is it that we end up doing that?
How do we change, or how do we cope with the savage nature of humanity? In fact, if I have one worry, and it is that nuclear weapons, which have become more and more refined and developed, will eventually be used, because you cannot trust human nature to refrain, even if you know that it will kill millions of people. So I'm very worried about that. I'm worried about whether my grandchildren or great-grandchildren might not become victims of a nuclear conflagration. Now, can you change it? Only by a strict regimentation under religious auspices. There's something to be said, in my opinion, for orthodoxy, by making rules and laws and insisting that they be enforced. In that respect, reform is wishy-washy and vague, and doesn't want to use any kind of so-called regimentation. But human nature needs it. We are in desperate need of direction, and I don't trust human nature. I'm very, very suspicious of human nature, my own included. So that's my answer.
Then why did you cop out on my question?
What was your question?
Why don't you have an opinion on the nuclear agreement? Whether it's
Because I don't
step in the right direction.
I don't know the agreement in detail, and I can't explain it, and I can't understand it. I would like to see a nuclear agreement, but this is beyond me. I would have to be a physicist in order to form a judgment. Yes?
Getting back to this Orthodox perspective, my husband had been born in Germany, and I remember him saying to the children at one point, the only way Judaism will continue is through Orthodoxy. We will reform Jews. And what is your perspective on the
Reform and orthodoxy. I think the way it will develop is that reform becomes more and more traditional. I won't be saying orthodox. Variation in Judaism is accepted. For all the centuries of our existence, there have always been different religious nuances and sects and groups and movements. I don't think the reform movement is the last word, but it's becoming more and more traditional. And I'm pretty optimistic about the Jewish faith and survival. Yeah.
Unlike you, many people do have an opinion about the nuclear agreement, to the point where it's caused much divisiveness between friends, colleagues, etc. And so much so that they won't even talk about it, because they know bringing it up is going to cause a terrific divide. Is there any way, speaking about divisiveness in the Jewish community, friends, even to the point that I would have liked in synagogue this high holidays, some reference to what the Jewish community is going through now, how they support Israel, what candidates do we support, do we change our affiliation because we care about Israel and about Jews? How does all of this divisiveness find some kind of support, help, that we know, we all read, we all have opinions, whether they're right or not, and how do we come to reconcile this so that we can speak civilly with friends who have differences of opinion And also, who do we support to engage, feeling that they will support Judaism, that they will support Israel, and how are we taking what we have, what privileges we have, and using them to the best of our ability?
My answer is this. I do not have the technical knowledge of judging the different provisions. There are pages and pages of articles and sub-articles about the nuclear developments. I don't have that knowledge. If I had access to it, much of it is secret, I might have an opinion. But at this point, I have no choice but to say, if major powers are making a nuclear agreement with Iran, chances are that that's the best we can get under the circumstances.
Do you feel that our president really cares deeply about Israel? Do you think he has a more global view of the world, and that he is not, as some might say, sacrificing Israel because he wants this agreement, because he wants to go down as this part of his legacy, because he thinks he is arranging a temporary peace? Or again, you have to vote one way or another, so you have to have an opinion at some point.
Well, he's not running again, so I won't vote one way or the other. But I say this, the president strikes me as very cool, icy almost. It's hard to get a word out of him that suggests he cares deeply about anything. But he is not bad. He's trying to develop some kind of compromise on every issue. My problem with Obama is primarily this. Obama is an academician. Very, very smart. Very intellectual. Very well informed. But he's not really a born politician. He does not seem to know the use of power. And in that sense, he has made America look weak under his administration. If I knew technically more about the nuclear provisions and developments and whatnot, we're talking about the nuclear program of the next 10 or 15 years. I'm not the person to answer any question on that. Yes, there's
Have you ever looked at the situation of Jews in Iran? From what I understand, there are at least 6 or 8 synagogues. There are 50,000 Jews. They have their own schools if they want them. I was thinking about it because at some point ISIS and Iran are held out as 2 great threats. But in ISIS, if you're a Jew, they kill you. But in Iran, apparently, there are Jewish people who live, who visit, who get visas, who go. They said 2 weeks ago the editor of the Jewish Daily Forward was invited to Iran and got to interview all the ministers and so on. Is Iran a little different for Jews than the typical Arab state?
Yes, Iran is different. You even have one or several Jews sitting in the Iranian parliament. Now, that's what most of us don't know. The fact of the matter is that the Jewish community of Iran is well treated. I hope that before long, I mean in terms of years, there will be some better understanding between Iran and the United States concerning its nuclear development. Right now, I think we have bigger problems than Iran. Yeah.
On the question before that, I think it's totally inappropriate for clergy to use their pulpit to try to affect the voters of the thing. It's part of the separation of state and religion. When they get into the politics, they're getting into the state. When they go to the ACLU and the Americans United bring quite a few suits on this subject.
Do you all hear the point? I think that rabbis and clergy often misuse their office, but I cannot go along with the point that a rabbi or a priest or minister should not ever express an opinion about a political issue. So it depends.
That was not what I was saying. I was saying, vote for so-and-so, because he supports, they can make their...
I think before a rabbi, a minister, or priest makes a suggestion of voting for, he ought to rethink it 3 times whether it's appropriate for him to make that comment. There are some issues on which I can say, yes, he has the right to say, like any other citizen, that he's for or against something. But I think he should be triply or more often conscious of the public responsibility. He should not abuse the pulpit to inordinately and excessively influence people. Yes?
So we come to gun control. And what do we do? Every once in a while, every other day, somebody else is murdered, and we say terrible. We had a young man who actually worked at Washington Hebrew congregation. He tutored our bar mitzvah students. He got out of a taxi cab down in, where was it? Adams Morgan, to meet some friends. Bullets were flying, and he's gone.
He was killed.
Yeah. It was a matter of he had just graduated from, or a year before, something, had just gotten out of his college.
What's my answer?
Yeah, what is the answer? And then children from Sandy Hook, I mean babies. And we all got very upset, and a day later we forgot. What do we do?
We should do everything possible to restrict the use of guns under certain circumstances. But if we were to abolish guns, you can be sure human beings would find other means of killing each other.
Well, like
There's something nasty and brutish about human nature. The thing to do, yes, the thing to do is to try to better educate the youth, to be more careful about things, but that's a messianic option. And I don't expect us to find a time when there's no more danger. We are most endangered by our fellow human beings. Yes?
When we discuss treaties like the Iranian nuclear treaty, it has to depend upon trust. How do we develop more trust with the Palestinians, with the matter of, in the Iranian, with monitoring the actual safety of what's going on?
Distrust is typical of all politics. There's no political issue on which there is not a measure of distrust. I have no way of answering that except to say integrity is the only way to develop trust. If you behave and conduct yourself with integrity and you're not aggressive, you're not murderous, you develop trust. Otherwise, we are going to have a lot of distrust between people, unfortunately. Yes?
What are your thoughts on the BDS movement on
What's
college
BDS?
campuses?
Boycott.
Divest
Yeah.
stock shares.
I don't think it's going to go very far, this BDS move. It's something we can live with. Israel will accept that. We'll do the best we can to reduce it, to prevent it, to offset it, but I don't believe that the BDS movement is really a major threat to Israel.
But it's rampant on college campuses.
Yeah.
Young Jewish students. The predominant number of Jewish students committed to Hillel and other organizations, and now almost essentially in a pro-Palestinian mood. young people at 18 to 20.
In 5 or 10 years, it will be an anti-Islamic movement on the college campus. Changes. We have to live with it. We are not going to have a trouble-free life. There's going to be some kind of danger, some kind of threat, no matter what we do.
Just to follow that comment, Stanford has recently had a very large surge of anti-Israeli sentiment, so much so that Jewish candidates who've run for office have been defeated. So much so that Janet Martyr, that heads Beth Am in Palo Alto, did an editorial, sent a letter to the press, spoke about it in a sermon, and it was very effective. And I think college officials began to look at it. So to a point where they monitored a little bit of some of the anti-Israel acts, which some of it was just desecration of certain property on campus, etc. There's an example of someone in the rabbinate speaking out, and supporting the Jewish population at Stanford. Do you think when this does happen at colleges all over, that maybe there needs to be some comment of the inappropriateness of this, and using college campuses where people are beginning to form ideas as a vehicle to spread this?
Well, college campuses adhere to the rule of freedom of speech, freedom of movement. There can be obnoxious, nasty movements on college campuses that we simply have to tolerate. I don't consider it as threatened. I think that with the proper response, we can reduce what damage the BDS movement can do. I don't consider it a major problem. It's a problem, but not something we should be afraid of. I think we have just about exhausted.
What do you think of the two-state solution? Excuse me, Israel and Palestine.
What about the two-state solution of Israel and Palestine? A very, very difficult question to answer. Neither of them want it. The Palestinians don't want an Israeli state, and the Israelis don't want a Palestinian state. So what do?
That's the question.
You suffer a few more years of trouble. That's all. Unfortunately, that's the price we have to pay. There is no way in which we can live as a society without suffering one way or the other.
I don't know if anyone's been here. I remember my first visit to Israel was 1965. I remember there was a divestment between, there was a gate, the Mandelbaum gate. Do you think we should have a divided Jerusalem again or not? I'd say no.
Well, Jerusalem is
Mandelbaum
actually divided. You have East Jerusalem, which is all Arab, and then the rest of Jerusalem, about 80% is Jewish, 70 to 80% is Jewish. Well, like I said before, they'll have tension, they'll pay a price for it, and then they're tired of it and finally work out some kind of compromise. I don't think the two-state solution is the solution. Ultimately, the Palestinians are in a worse condition than the Israelis because they have really a civil war within their own group. Hamas on the one side, then the Palestinian Authority on the other. They don't have a unified kind of authority. And it's hard to make any prediction as to what will happen. I don't have it. Yes?
The results of the problem in the Israeli parliament because of their electoral system, where neither party, either the right or the left, get a majority. So the only way they can set up a government is to take in the conservative, ultra-Orthodox into their things. And that's why the ultra-Orthodox get so much a favored position in Israel.
The name for this is compromise. Neither party can get what they want, so they have to somehow compromise. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.